The TSA definitely not A-OK. Airport security workers getting an F on tests conducted by undercover agents. They say screeners did not detect their banned weapons or fake explosives nearly 96% of the time. And John says it's exactly why we need private companies handling this, not the government. Go ahead, John, make your case.
Absolutely, we need private markets to do it, because let's face it, with the TSA, when your practices don't work, you get more funding for them. When your employees do a lousy job, they are not fired. In the private markets, we starve bad ideas and we get rid of bad employees. Imagine how much better and quicker airport security would be, how much safer we would be if we left it up to the private markets.
And Bill, how much more polite they would be. How many of us have been treated like scum when we go in there, like we're criminals? Everybody has. If it was private sector folks are a little more cognizant of how the customers work and what they like and don't like.
Well, they might be a little bit too nice. Listen, John, if you want to privatize, start with schools where you could do some real good. Security forces should be very last on the agenda. And ask yourself, do we really want to have our police, our military, or our TSA be run by people who are going to be tempted to cut costs in order to increase their dividends? I don't think that's a place to start privatization.
Steve, the government, the private sector would not accept this, first of all. 96% failure rate. This guy, by the way, he's been taken off his job as director or acting for the TSA, but he's still in the government. He's still working for the government. If this was a private sector, he'd be out on his can, right?
That's right. A 96% failure rate, a 4% failure rate in the private sector would get you canned. And what they should do is have competition. TSA can compete, but have private contractors compete, and especially on effective security measures. Get the brains working from the private sector, and we'll be able to get smoother security and better security.
Sabrina, by the way, when I said they treat you like scum, I saw you raise your hand. You've been. I think everybody has a personal horror story dealing with these folks.
Yeah, you're going to shuffle through like cattle, and they take away your, wiffle ball bat and all that stuff. But no, I mean,
yeah, they're good at wiffle balls. They're lousy at bombs. I mean, that's the story here.
No, and I actually think this is a perfect example of why you don't want a one-size-fits-all government program. I mean, if anything, it's making us so much less safe because of the predictability and the systemization of it all. I mean, if I were a terrorist, I would think, well, I figured this whole thing out. What I think we really want is for it to be privatized so that every airport is sort of a little laboratory in which they can try the best tactics out. We would have, thousands of different ways that we can make sure that we're actually catching the bad guys and not holding up, me and my 3 kids because of their sippy cups.
Right. Now, Bruce, we should mention, it's not like the TSA are doing nothing. In 2014, over 2,200 guns were discovered in carry-on bags, 83% of which were loaded. So they are doing something, but they failed these tests miserably.
Yeah, I mean, we've had problems with private companies in the past, 9/11, all this type of stuff. But my issue with the private companies is you still have to have government involved, and maybe I'm jaded because that is Chicago behind me, is that when the bids are let and the cronyism takes over and who gets the contracts, and I know Sabrina talks about local control, you get more governments involved with all of that, and you're going to get, who knows who you're going to get.
All right, well, it's true. Every transfer will complex. By the way, that's why a lot of us here were arguing for a private TSA in the beginning. Yeah. We did it here on Forbes about 10 years ago. But, Rich, a lot of Americans want, for example, the kind of security they have in Israel. Now, I know the government's in charge of that. Tel Aviv Airlines, or El Al Airlines, is a government service. But if we wanted something like that, we could get it in the private sector.
Yeah, although I think Israel is not a model that transfers to the United States because we wouldn't put up with the time it takes. The great model is Singapore, where you get a high level of security, you get great technology, and you get a friendliness. It's all fast and efficient. We should outsource it from Singapore.
Well, John, the great thing about a private sector solution to this is that the market would decide what Americans want. I mean, the market could change if they want something like Israel, or if they want something like Singapore, or something in between. The market would provide it.
Yeah, absolutely. Markets make mistakes all the time. The big difference relative to government is that market mistakes are starved, and then we go on to something that works better. So imagine the different airlines and airports competing to figure out the best way to do it. There's no incentive to let criminals through because people won't use that airport, won't use that airline. But let these private entities compete with government. We know they're making mistakes. The problem is we know they're being perpetuated with more and more taxpayer dollars.
Steve, we argued for a private answer to this a long time ago when they were setting up the TSA. Is it too late to go back?
No, again, have that competition between the TSA and private contractors.
So give people a choice.
Yes, and the government can oversee it in terms of having certain requirements met, as they do now in managing some of these airports, where private contractors have done a more efficient job, even though they pay the same amount of money. So let's have that competition. Get the brains working.
There's the Forbes answer, folks. You got it right here. The Cash In gang, by the way, getting ready to roll at the bottom of the hour. Eric, what do you got?
Hey, David, the Supreme Court ruling against Abercrombie & Fitch for not hiring a woman wearing a religious headdress, but should companies have the right to hire who they want? We'll debate it. Plus, a high school principal says he's okay with a teacher using Russell Brand clips, bashing cashing in and capitalism. Wow. We'll see you at the bottom of the hour.
Yeah. We will be watching. Thank you, Eric. But up here first, are you a lawmaker too drunk to drive? Well, don't worry. Just call a 24-hour car service, all paid for by taxpayers. The Forbes gang on that outrage coming next.